Hello and welcome. Today we've got Brent Johnson, who is the host and director of Global Freedom Report and the Voice of Freedom, and who is teaching people how to free yourselves from government. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin for all my daily newsreels. Brent, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you and what have you been up to?
I'm doing fine. It's a pleasure to be back with you. And what I'm up to is, it's kind of weird in today's world in which there is so much authoritarianism, so much um, effort to violate the rights of the people by governments all over the world. When that happens, I tend to get more busy. I tend to have a lot, my phone rings off the hook and my days are very long, but I'm gratified that I consider it like a gift from God that I've been given certain skills and the ability to explain things that are otherwise complicated to most people, explain them in plain language, and I help people to free themselves from the endless encroachment of Big Brother. And so, my life is something that I find very gratifying, that I'm given the opportunity to help people that way. And yeah, I'm very busy these days because the world is insane and we are living in an asylum and people are nuts.
Absolutely. No, we need lots of education, especially with everything that's happening around the world and to free ourselves. So you sent me an article that you wrote saying the presumption of innocence. Why don't you tell us what that exactly implies?
Well, it's kind of interesting in USA law. Okay, after the American Revolution, what was established was a constitutional republic founded on a basic principle that had never existed in the world, and it was the principle that anybody in any circumstance is presumed to be innocent unless proven guilty. Now, this was a radical change. No government up to that point, at least none that we know of in recent history, um, went by that principle. The general principle was the king's word is law. If the king says you're guilty, and that's it. And you could even go into history in old England, where the famous trial of William Penn in the 1500s, I think it was. William Penn was out there preaching Quakerism. Okay, that's all he was doing. He was standing in the street preaching Quakerism. But at the time, the only legal religion was the king's Christianity. That's it. The Roman Catholic Church. That was it. Anything else, okay, was a violation of the law. So they actually put William Penn in prison. And the king's court told the jury that he's guilty and you have to find him guilty. Okay, because that's what the law says. So that was the standard everywhere in the world until America came up. And by the way, what happened in that scenario, just as a little sidestep here, is that the jury refused to find him guilty. They said there's nothing wrong. The guy's just in the street talking about Quakerism. He's not hurting anybody. And so the jury was thrown in the dungeon without any food, without any water, without any toilet facilities. They were just thrown in the dungeon. And what came out of this, it became a major political issue. And what came out of this incident was the concept of what today we call jury nullification, that a jury has the right and the power to ignore the law. If you say the law is something and the jury says this is a bad law, this law is not good, we are not going to go along with it, the jury actually gets to determine the law itself, not just the facts in the case. The facts can be manipulated, but the jury sits above the law. That came out of the William Penn trial, and it is a universal concept today in any free society. But in America, everything was founded on the principle that you are always considered to be innocent unless there is evidence to prove that you are guilty. And today that has been turned around so completely. All it takes is a statement posted on some social media platform that says something, and you end up with a mass of people who are doing comments back and forth saying, yeah, this guy should be hanged by the neck and dead and all that because he's guilty of this, he's guilty of that, when the truth is that people are saying that have no idea what's going on. All they know is what they got from, say, the media or from the government, but they have no idea what the facts of the case are. But they are led around emotionally into making assumptions of guilt. And it's a political mechanism that is used to essentially weaponize the media and weaponize the government's activities, okay, by stoking the fires of stoking the riot fires, let's call it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what happens all the time today. And it's horrible because we've abandoned this fundamental principle that you are innocent. You are assumed to be innocent unless you're proven guilty. And, some of our founders, one of our greatest judicial founders in America was William Blackstone. In 1760, he wrote that better that 10 guilty people be freed than one innocent incarcerated. And over the years, Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson both expanded on that to say, let 100 guilty people go free rather than one innocent incarcerated. And we really ought to get back to that because what we have today is an insane asylum, and it's just destroying the lives spiritually and actually of so many people.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that the jury has the power to, bypass the law if they all agree unanimously on certain things, ignoring the facts. But what if that what they unanimously agreed on, the jury that is, contradicted what the courts wanted? For an example, it was a law that was against what the courts wanted or the left want.
Yeah, and it's a good question. The issue is that in a just society, the jury has the final say, not the court. It is what the jury determines. And if the jury finds that a law is simply a bad law, the fact that it's a law is not sufficient because it's called jury nullification. There's an organization called the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA, that actually educates people around jury nullification. And in a republic where the rights of people are honored, okay, and protected, the jury has that absolute right. In a dictatorship, that is not the case, where the government, King George, if you will, back in the 18th century, okay, would say the king's word is law. And what the king says is law, and it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. So the jury system is supposed to counter that. It's supposed to stop the evil that is government from exercising its evil and incarcerating people who are innocent and presumed innocent. Okay, they may or may not be innocent, but they have not been proven guilty. And so they are left alone, which is how it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. Now, don't you think we should be measuring what should be law and what shouldn't be law by, having we can measure it if it's ethical. Is this ethical? For example, should we put this person in prison and take their property away from them if they don't pay their property tax? For me, that's unlawful. Just because a law is law doesn't make it lawful. It's legal, but it's unlawful. What do you think?
And by the way, the distinction for those who are not familiar with it, the distinction between legal and lawful is significant. Legal comes from the root of legislated. Legal, legislated, yes, exactly. That's what that comes from. What is legal is what the government has determined is legal. What is lawful is what God has determined is lawful. It's a very substantial difference. And so what is legal is frequently not lawful. This occurs because, and I say this all the time, and I repeat myself, and I will continue to do so, that the people who are staffing governments, and I mean all governments today, the people who staff the governments, whether they are appointed or elected, are criminals. Now, I'll just use the United States of America as an example here. The supreme law of the land is the Constitution. Okay, that's the supreme law of the land. Everybody would agree to that. The people who work in government are trained to find ways to circumvent the Constitution. How can we get around the limitation imposed on us by the Constitution? And they're trained to do that. There are people whose jobs are to figure out a way to get around the Constitution, which means that they're trying to figure out a way to get around the law. They are breaking the law. That makes them criminals. The character of criminals is to seek to take what is yours and make it theirs. So that's what you have in government. Today, it's all over the place, and it's obvious. They're not even hiding it anymore. And that's what you have going on. So essentially, you have a bunch of lawless people doing lawless things that are hurting ordinary people, ordinary citizens. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And by the way, every time the government violates your rights, and that's all the government can ever do, any government, you don't get your rights from any government. And I don't care what their legal laws say. Your rights come from your creator. And unless you were created by government, you didn't get your rights from government. Government comes from your rights come from a higher source than government, and government can never take away your rights. What government can do is violate your rights. And when your rights are violated, there is always an unspoken question. What are you going to do about it? Think of a bully who comes and, at recess in school and takes your lunch, okay, and just takes it and goes into your pockets and takes your money. And then looks at you and says, what are you going to do about it? And you're afraid, and you go, and you go away because you're afraid. But that's exactly what government does today. They violate your rights, and they don't say it, but it's the unspoken question. What are you going to do about it? And until we, the people, start answering that question, until we actually start putting teeth, putting consequences to the violations of law perpetrated by the government, it won't change. Think of you have a family, you have children, you have young children. Every family with young children will go through this. The children will push the envelope. What can I get away with? They'll do something they know it's not right. They know it's wrong. Okay, but they'll do it anyway. Now, depending on how the parents respond, that reflects on how the children will continue to act. If the parents respond in a way to punish the children or to make there be consequences to the children's actions, the children will think twice about doing that something again. But if you do nothing, they say, I got away with this. Well, what more can I get away with? How much more can I push the envelope? It's exactly what goes on with the government today.
Yeah.
And the solution is to make a consequence. I'm not here to tell you what that consequence is, but we have to start making it cost them. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of take away their authority, take away their pension, let them become homeless. Okay, that would be a deterrent. So I'm a big fan of that. But whatever the answer is, you have to answer the question, or the children will not stop the violations.
Absolutely. No, it's a whole big scan, the monetary system, the legal system, and all these people that created this, they call themselves Rothschild, and they are pro-communism, they are pro-Zionists, What do you think about the fact? Do you believe that they created Israel? What's your take on this?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, so the people.
Who created Israel? And I assume you're talking about the country Israel, not the Israelites of the Old Testament.
No, the Israelites of the Old Testament are in Arabic means anybody, or in Latin, I think it means anybody who strives for God is an Israelite. That's what it means. It's got nothing to do with the country, but the
Right.
country, the land that was taken away, that was occupied by the Palestinians once it was part of Africa. Then they changed it, calling it the Middle East. And now they call it the North, I think. What's your view about that piece of land that was occupied by Palestinians, and I think even Ethiopia?
Well, that comes from the United Nations. The United Nations is a bunch of unelected people who want to rule the world. Now, I am simplifying it, but that's the accurate statement. It used to be the League of Nations. The League of Nations is where it started. And the League of Nations was it was a failure of major proportions. No country wanted to be a part of it. So it went away. We don't even think about the League of Nations anymore. It came back in another reincarnation. It came back reincarnated as the United Nations. But the United Nations is still a bunch of unelected bureaucrats who want to rule the world. They decided on the heels of World War II, they decided that they were going to create this patch of land and give it to a country that they called Israel. As far as I'm concerned, from a common law perspective, that's a direct violation. The rule of common law is that you can do anything you want as long as you do not directly violate the life, liberty, or property of another. The Palestinians who lived on that land had their fundamental rights violated. It doesn't matter what the reason is. We had a critical reason for it. These people needed a place to be. Okay, they were being violated. The Germans went and they did this and they did that to them. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, and reasons do not justify a fundamental violation of what God has given each of us. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the Palestinians, they worship Allah instead of Yahweh. That's not the issue. The issue is that they have certain rights, as do the Israelis, as do the Brits, as do the Americans, as do the Japanese. They all have fundamental rights. And it is not for either government or non-government organizations to go in and violate those rights, which is what happened with the creation of Israel. So I think it's a totally unlawful act that happened. I also consider the government of Israel to be just about as reflective of fascism as any country since Nazi Germany, since Mussolini's Italy.
Yeah. Now, I don't condemn any violence at all, but what do you think about the retaliation just the other day with Iran towards the attack to Israel?
Pardon me, did you say you don't condemn any violence?
I don't promote violence. I don't,
Okay. I assume that's what you meant.
yeah.
Okay,
I don't condemn that behavior.
Mhm.
I don't promote violence. I'm a peaceful person. I like peace. I promote
Mhm.
peace. Um,
Mhm.
did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad. Yeah. But furthermore, saying that though, in the Old Testament, it says eye for an eye. And, we've seen a lot of, Hamas attacking the Palestinians and what they've done. What do you think about the attack in Israel by Iran? Is this is this other countries saying, I'm fed up of this behavior. I'm fed up of this communist, fascist agenda that's wanting to overtake the world. What is your thought on that?
Well, what Israel did, Israel went in, I think it was in Syria where they went after the Iranian embassy. Um, there has to be a point where you say you have crossed the line. What are we going to do about it? We're going to do this. So I'm not at all surprised that Iran responded the way Iran responded. And from what I understand, Iran has said, we consider the matter closed now. We have taken action to respond to what Israel did. Now, if Israel goes and escalates it, that's on Israel. That's not on Iran. I know everybody wants to make Iran the bad guy here. And the bottom line is, do individual countries have the right to live their lives under their principles without being influenced by other countries or by what the majority of the world might think is right? Do they have that right? It's a yes or no question. If they do not have that right, then they are slaves. If they do have that right, then you leave them alone to do what they want. America wants to turn everybody into their type of system. They say we want to spread democracy, which, by the way, the American founding fathers found the principle of democracy repugnant, their words, repugnant to a free society. That a democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. So when if governments were left alone, just live your life the way you want to live it by your standards in your country, okay, and live and let live. And that concept is completely ignored today. All that matters is doing what the so-called, they call them the elite. I don't call them the elite because they are not elite. Okay, they're a bunch of thugs. Okay,
Absolutely.
but we're told that in life, and I feel like you, I prefer peace, but I'm willing to wage war if that's what's necessary to preserve our fundamental rights. What God has given you is a precious gift. What are you willing to do to defend that gift? And that's a question everybody should ask. Sometimes, even scripture says it, sometimes defending that gift means fighting against the evil, because
Yeah.
the evil will not stop peacefully. Adolf Hitler would never have stepped down peacefully. It could not have happened.
Yeah. I have to say, the winners of any wars always end up telling the story. The losers don't tell the story of history. It's always the winners. And we know who the winners are because they're in control and they're struggling to stay in control today. And hopefully the good side is going to win this time. However, my father has a very old friend. He's in his late 90s and he's German. And he says that Hitler done great things for his own country. And the media makes out to be this very bad person where he wasn't even that bad of a person, he says. And when we look at the history of the Jews, what they've done to the Russians before the Second World War, um, how do we know that Hitler wanted to get rid of that group of people and that they gave us the wrong story, that Hitler's a bad person? The Rockefellers, who control the education system, have made sure the school boards teach the children in history class that Hitler was this terrible person. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a possibility that we've been lied to about Hitler and he was one of those who wanted to get rid of the deep state?
It's certainly possible, and I would say that it's almost uncontestable that we've been lied to on many levels when it concerns people like that. Please remember, in Mussolini's Italy, the trains ran on time. So pointing out the good or pointing out the bad by itself is not a full picture. Um, I was not alive then, that as far as I know, so I cannot honestly speak about this with knowledge. All I can speak about is with belief, and my belief could be in error because I may be lacking information. So I'm not going to try and expound on that question because wherever I go with it is simply a subjective perspective based on limited information to which I've been exposed. And so it would be an unfair discussion there. Is it possible? It's certainly possible.
But it's good that we can have these free conversations. And I know this is a very big, thing for you, very important subject that you like to talk about when it comes to exercising our free speech. And this is a very good demonstration that we should be able to ask all the questions without worrying about being called an anti-Semitic, which is another term that they made to cover themselves. The Zionists, the communists, they created that word anti-Semitic. I think it was in 1956, and I forgot the person that named that created that term. But it was to protect themselves and so that they can get away with crime. What do you think?
Well, and I think it's horrible that one group of people is being given, okay, some kind of elevation to godhood, that it's against the law to say anything against Israel. It's against the law to say anything at all that is offensive or insulting or questions the integrity of Jewish people. Now, I was raised Jewish. I was raised in a Jewish family. Okay. So and I respect everybody who earns the respect. I mean, I will give everybody respect at the outset, and then you have to earn more or less based on your actions. And I couldn't care less whether you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, even atheist. It doesn't matter. What I care about, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Tory, Whig. It makes no difference to me. What I look for is, who are you? How do you define yourself? What is your character? That's what I seek. Your acts define you. And so to sit there and say there is one group of people who you cannot ever say anything bad about, okay, I neither accept that nor do I believe that. And again, you said it yourself. It goes to the issue of free speech, and if the first tenet of Marxism, most people know the Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks, but there are 8 tenets to Marxism. The very first of those tenets is there is no God, there is only the state. Now, the reason that's the first tenet is that everything else about Marxism is unworkable if there is a God. If there is a being, there is an entity that is more powerful than the state, then there is no Marxism. And so the first tenet is there is no God. We say that your rights come from God, okay? And that sets the standard for everything else, that your rights come from the supreme sovereign of the universe. You yourself are a member of that royal family. Your rights are sacrosanct. They are the most valuable, important thing that exists. And when you have something that important, you value it, you take care of it, you defend it, you protect it. When we strip away that, there is no God, then suddenly the value of our rights is gone. Now, okay, all we need is to have, enough people who say that socialism is better than anything else. Enough people who say that we're being hurt by you giving out misinformation. Enough people say that, and that's used to truncate free speech. And we've completely bypassed the idea that your right to freedom of speech is a gift from God. And no one wants to say it because it will offend some people. And the bottom line is that you don't have a right not to be offended. If I say something that offends you and you don't want to hear it, go into another room where you can't hear it.
Exactly.
You have every right to do that. But you do not have the right to stop me from saying it. Well, it's well known in law that you can't yell fire in a theater, and that's used as an example. That's an example. You can't yell fire in the theater. So there are limitations on your free speech. And it's very hard to argue that. But I would argue that. I would argue that you can yell fire in a theater. You shouldn't. It's not smart. And if there is damage caused by your actions, well, you're responsible for that damage. If somebody is hurt by your actions, that's a crime. You could be prosecuted. But to sit there and say you can't do it because it could cause a problem, the moment you do that for fire in a theater, you have to be able to do it for everything else in life.
Yeah.
And that's what we see today.
We should say to the government that we are offended of paying property taxes on our own home to raise our families.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Let's talk about property rights, because
I completely agree with you. But it takes more than just saying it.
Yeah.
And that's the real point. What are you willing to do about it? And most people draw the line there. It's like, well, I'm scared if I do something, they may come after me. And the truth is, in a war between good and evil, which is what we're facing today, okay, there are casualties to war. And those casualties come because somebody, let's say somebody on the light side, stands up against somebody on the dark side. And that somebody on the dark side escalates it. And somebody gets hurt. Well, that's going to happen when you stand up against evil, because evil will never stand down peacefully. That's the strength of evil, that it doesn't stand down. We're going to keep this up. We're going to escalate this. Are you going to escalate it? We can hold our metaphorical liquor better than you. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we're faced with. And we need to sit there and say, no, you can't. Okay. I can hold mine better than you. And here's how. I'm going to stand up for this. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to bring the cops in. Okay. I'll bring the militia in. Okay. We're going to shoot you. Okay. I'm going to shoot you back. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and arm up and shoot people. I'm trying to make an example here that you have to escalate. Otherwise, you have to comply. It's one or the other. You either comply or you don't comply. If you don't comply, the other side will escalate.
Yeah.
So that's what we're in. And we have to make decisions about that. How valuable is free speech to you? How valuable are your rights from God to you? What are you willing to do to protect them? And what are you not willing to do to protect them?
No, of course, absolutely. Free speech is something that, we all have different opinions. And if we don't have free speech, then what, are we just going to repeat the one thing that we all have to say, even if we disagree with it? Because we can't be unique. We can't express our difference in opinions. We have to learn to live with each other so we could respect each other's differences and opinions. And that's okay. Absolutely. But Brent Johnson, we're running out of time, and it's been an absolute honor to have you on my show. Thank you very much for sharing everything with us today. Please, I was going to say, is there anything else that you would like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Before I give out contact info, there was one other thing. The former Prime Minister of New Zealand actually came out. This is during the non-existent COVID pandemic. She actually came out and said at some public function that the government is the only legitimate source of valid information. And we are going to go after people who promote any other type of information. Now, I'm paraphrasing exactly what she said, but that was the tenor of it. And she actually came out and said, the government is the only authorized, legitimate source of real information. And It's just not true. Thomas Paine said government at its very best is a necessary evil, which means government is fundamentally evil. If you're a good person, you do not sit there and support and promote evil. And what we do at Freedom Bound International is we help people to embrace their fundamental rights, and we teach people techniques to protect and preserve their rights in the face of government oppression. We set up common law pure trusts that will absolutely wrap an ironclad wall of protection around your property rights. We can teach you how to extricate yourself from government control as well. It's not necessarily, it's an easy process, but it's not necessarily an easy decision, because you have to step out of the convenience that the government provides you for doing things their way. If you want to know more, give us a call toll free. If you are in America, it's 888-385-3733, 888-385-FREE. If you're outside of the United States of America, it's dial 1, which is the country code, 541-359-2549, 541-359-2549, or the toll-free number 888-385-3733. Our website is www.freedomradio.us, freedomradio.us. Tremendous website. You will enjoy it, I am absolutely certain. And I do a weekly conference call on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. For information as to how to get into the call, go to the website, freedomradio.us, and there is on the homepage something that says conference calls, and it's got all the contact information. I'm also on Telegram. Again, under the conference call column on the homepage of the website is a bright blue button. Join Brent on Telegram. Click the button. It'll take you right into the room. However you do it, I hope that you will take the time, make the effort to make contact with us and let us know how we can help you to live free from the endless encroachment of criminal governments.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll speak again very soon, Brent. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And God bless you, Nicholas.
God bless.